Hello, everyone. This is Tim coming to you from, again, my basement makeshift workspace. And in this lesson, I'm going to be discussing the legislative branch of government, the lawmaking branch. And for this lesson, I'm going to be focusing primarily on the federal level legislative. However, I will discuss briefly some of the state and local level examples. Now, the legislative branch has the sole authority to enact legislation, to pass laws. They can levy taxes, they can declare war, they confirm or reject certain presidential appointments. They also have substantial investigative powers. So when it comes to, for example, impeaching and convicting a president, or looking into certain affairs that affect the whole country. I'll get a little bit more to that when we get into the checks and balances lesson. So the federal level legislative branch consists of two sections. There is the House of Representatives and the Senate. I wrote those down. I know you probably can't read them a little bright, but they're right there. So the House of Representatives has 435 voting members, and they are divided amongst all the states, and they're based off population. So the bigger your population, the more representatives you have. So a state like California is going to have more than, say, Montana. This was built in to protect the rights of larger states because they have more people. There are also 6 non-voting members, 1 from D.C., 1 from Puerto Rico, and 4 from other territories of the United States. Now, the House of Representatives is headed by the Speaker of the House at this current moment, that is Nancy Pelosi. This person is elected by the other representatives, and they are also third in line for the president. So if President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence were unable to fulfill their duties, then Speaker Nancy Pelosi would become president. Now, there are several powers that are exclusive to the House of Representatives. They are the first to initiate revenue bills, so dealing with money. They impeach federal officials, so be careful with that term impeach. They're not kicking them off office. Impeachment isn't that. Impeachment is saying it's okay to move forward with the trial to get them kicked out. So that's what that is. And I'll go over that a little bit more in the checks and balances lesson. They also elect the president in case of a tie, which is not likely, just given how the situation is. Now, the Senate is the other section, and the Senate has 100 members, 2 for each state. So this is in order to protect all the states, even the smaller ones. The vice president technically serves as the president of the Senate and votes in case of a tie for any bills. This is also very rare. The vice president usually doesn't do too much with the Senate unless absolutely necessary. They kind of elect their own leaders. So right now the leader is Mitch McConnell. He was elected by the Senate. He is the majority member, which means that there are more Republicans currently in Congress, and he was elected their leader. So he's the majority leader there. They have the sole power to approve presidential appointments that are needed. So not all presidential appointments are needed to be approved, but they are if there is, they do it. They also are in charge of ratifying treaties. Now, the House does also need to approve vice presidential appointments, and they also need to approve treaties that involve foreign trade. So the House does have a little bit of that involved. Just for reference, in Onondaga County, Central New York, one of the more well-known representatives, John Katko. There are others. William Nagarelli is another one. In the Senate, our current senators in New York are Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand. So those are the 2 senators for New York State. So those are the 2 sections of the federal level of the legislative branch. Now, they both work together to pass laws. So in order to pass legislation and send it to the president, both houses need to pass it with a majority vote. So they need more people to vote yes than no. Now, after this happens, it goes to the president. The president can choose to sign it or not sign it. If he signs it, then it becomes law. If he chooses not to, that's called a veto, which is going to get into more specific details when we get to the checks and balances lesson. But should the president choose to veto a law, the House and Senate can pass it without his signature, but now they need 2/3 vote rather than just a straight majority. So it's a little bit more, which makes it a little bit tougher. Now, technically, a bill can be written by anybody, but only a member of Congress can introduce it onto the floor. So usually what happens is after a bill is introduced, it goes to a committee for review. These committees are made up of specifically chosen senators and representative members, and they decide whether to change it, whether to reject it. Maybe they approve it. They look at it more closely, kind of like a subsection of Congress. They all deal with specific sections. So, for example, there's a committee for health. There's a committee for revenue. A specific example, the committee for ways and means that deals with Social Security. So any Social Security bills that go through have to be approved by the Ways and Means Committee first. Now, after the committee approves it or does what to do with it, it goes on to the actual full House of Representatives and full Senate, and they vote on it. And technically speaking, these two bills are supposed to have the same language. So the bill that the House sees and the bill that the Senate sees have to be the exact same thing. Not always the case. You may see in the news that the House has a version of this and the Senate has a version of this. But technically they're supposed to. They don't really follow that rule. It's just easier than getting the exact language in both. So again, the federal level, you have Congress, you have the House of Representatives, and you have the Senate. It is a bicameral legislative branch. It means two houses. That's why bi, two. And a lot of times on the state level, it's a very similar setup. So, for example, in New York State, we have the State Assembly and we have the State Senate. So, its State Assembly is kind of like the House of Representatives. The State Senate's like the Senate. So, very similar functions. Just they're in charge of passing laws at the state level. Now, most towns and cities and villages, whatever, they also have a version of the legislative branch. There's town councils, city councils. For example, Syracuse has the Syracuse Common Council, and again, a very similar function where they're in charge of passing laws and implementing them into the society. So that's all I have on the legislative branch. I hope this was helpful for you. It's a very brief lesson, but it covers a lot of what you're going to need to know for the test that you're going to take. I hope this was helpful for you, and I will see you for the next lesson.